It's Heidi M. I am back with another documentary. This time I will be spotlighting the documentary Marriage Cops, which is a feature documentary from directors Shashwati Talukdar and Cheryl Hess, which gives us an unprecedented look at the women's helpline in Dehradun, India, where marriage mediation meets law enforcement in the most unexpected ways. They have intimate access in terms of the intricate role of the state police in the most personal aspects of its citizens' lives. The directors set out to answer a simple question in the sense that they wanted to know, why do couples go to the police to solve their marriage problems, especially considering that the police are generally feared and avoided. But they quickly find themselves in a world of contradictions, power struggles, and frankly, raw human emotion. Marriage Cops had its world premiere at the Hot Docs Canadian International Documentary Film Festival, and you will hear more about the film from the two directors shortly. Stay tuned. Good morning, friends. I am live from Hot Docs International Documentary Film Festival in Toronto. I'll be speaking with the directors of Marriage Cops, Shashwati Talukdar and Cheryl Hess. Nice to meet you both.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
I am very stuffy, friends, so if you hear me kind of coughing, it's allergy season. So on that note, maybe we'll just get started. Shashwati, maybe let's talk a little bit about your union with Cheryl and what the first discussions were like about this film.
Well, we've been friends since graduate school. We both went to university. And so we've been friends for how many years now, Cheryl?
So many.
We don't want to say.
That's all good.
And so Cheryl and I had, of course, worked together when we were in school. And then we met up for a coffee in New York City a few years ago. And we started talking about experiences. I had just done a film about denotified tribes in India,
right.
A particular group, and these are people who were considered criminal tribes by by the colonial laws that were passed, and their interaction with the police is very, very deep and very long-standing. A lot of surveillance, a lot of ill treatment. So I was, of course, curious about the police, and then Cheryl had done work.
Yeah, I had worked on some television shows as a camera person that were law enforcement based, and so I mean that was the impetus, but it was it started with coffee and just like, we should make something. Yeah. And then I just happened to stumble across this article about these police women policing initiatives in India, and so I shared that with Shash, and we both were like, wow, this is interesting, should we do it? And we just used our own personal funds to do a research trip, and we looked at a few different things. The first place we went was Mumbai, and that was good, but since Shash doesn't speak the language of that state, and I certainly don't speak that language, so it would have been like doubly difficult. And then we went to Shash's hometown of Dehradun, and then we looked at what they had going on there, and then it was kind of that eureka moment, like, oh my God, we just looked at each other like, oh my God, this is it.
Can you talk, you have such great access in terms of what we're seeing on screen. I can't wait for audiences to kind of watch it with you so that you can hear all the oohs and ahs, but what was that negotiation like of presenting the idea of wanting to document, and then...
That's all Shash.
Yes.
So it took about a year to actually get access to the station to film, and it was mostly because, the police in India have a pretty bad reputation.
Yes.
And some of it's probably justified. Highest rate of people dying in custody, and of course accusations of malfeasance and all sorts of things. So they're generally very, very suspicious of anybody wanting to come and document anything. But because I'm from the town and the community, they knew that I had an interest in actually being fair.
Right.
And and I have to give credit to the police of the state. They were once they understood where we were coming from, which was a place wanting to understand, wanting to touch on the nuances of what was going on, that we weren't interested in sort of the cheap applause. that they became much more open, and they were really wonderful, because the only instruction we got was, you can film as much as you want, whatever you want. All we want is, we want you to be fair.
Right.
That was the only directive we got, and they didn't interfere at all. There was no editorial interference. There was no demand in terms of wanting to see our footage or anything like that.
Right.
So they were very supportive.
That's great.
And we were required to have permission from both parties and the couples before we can film the counseling sessions, before we could roll camera.
That's right.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about that, because Cheryl, I'm guessing you also did camera.
Yes.
So I assume that there was going to be negotiations with the folks that ended up being in the film and being recorded in general. And, you kind of had this fly on the wall perspective. And what was it like at the beginning? And then how did that shift through the time of filming in terms of what you were hoping to see or capture? And then because we also kind of get to know some of the couples too in the film.
I mean, for me, the counseling sessions were definitely challenging. I have a long background as an observational vérité shooter, and whenever I'm mentoring young people who want to shoot, it's a very specific way of shooting, and a lot of it, I always tell them, it's not about the shot, it's about listening. And so when I was filming in the helpline, that, of course, I could listen, but I couldn't understand. So things like timing, my cutaways, that was really challenging, because everything with the counseling sessions we had to do a lot of editing. They could be 45 minutes to an hour long, and everything is kind of at the pitch that when you're arguing with your partner. And so I didn't know when were the moments to do the cutaways all the time. So I used the force.
Yes.
It was a matter of reading expressions, reading body language, and trying to time it and make sure I could catch what I can without having understanding. And most of the time it worked out. There were sometimes when I should have probably been pointing the other way. But in general, but that's it. Even if it's in English, if you're filming a scene that's 45 minutes long, you don't know until the edit really what bites you're gonna end up using.
Absolutely. And I'm curious about the superintendents that you were able to, that's their title, right? Sanya and...
Sanya and Krishna. Yeah, they're sub-inspectors.
Sub-inspectors. And how were they with you over the course of filming, too? I feel like maybe there was some relationship that might have developed in terms of they kind of got used to you being there and filming, and kind of what was their understanding of what you were trying to capture, I guess?
That was really interesting, because they were first and foremost police officers.
Yes.
And they were very aware of it, and they always kept that professional distance and that professional boundary. And we sort of developed a very healthy respect for each other, because they were very professional and they saw that we were very professional. So through that, we were able to sort of work with them, but it's never, you put a person in uniform, they're going to be different. So they're not going to become your best buddies,
right.
And sort of let you sort of enter into their lives, because that's who they are.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's this expectation for character-based document. People are always expecting character-based documentaries and a certain amount of candor. And I think what people who haven't worked in or around law enforcement, that it's the police are a paramilitary organization, and so of course they're humans and they have thoughts, but they're not going to share them with you, especially if they're interested in having a long career.
Right.
That, it doesn't behoove them to share their personal thoughts. Their personal thoughts are the thoughts of the police,
the organization.
And so that's how they're going. So it was challenging for us to try to find these small moments of humanity, and I think that comes across just, especially when it's scenes between them, like those quiet moments, lunches and things like that, and when they're just chit-chatting, you get a little bit more sense of their personalities. But in general, it's it's business.
Absolutely.
So, and you can't blame them. I mean, they do. I wasn't sure, because I'm not from India, obviously, how it's a good career to have, right? Like
it's a good career to have. It's very competitive to get in.
Yes.
And one doesn't really sort of understand the lives of women in those positions, because they had some power, yet they're doing double duty. They're working. The hours are really long.
Yes.
They're working all day, then they go home and they're doing the childcare and the cooking. And it was quite a privilege to sort of witness that and start understanding what life behind the uniform is, and and developing a healthy respect for that.
That is so true. When I was watching, I obviously had a chance to preview the film, and I'm sitting here with my own notions of marriage and expectations of women and working in professional environments. And then I see them, as you mentioned, we get to know how long those hours are. And they also have to still model that culture of being a wife and a mother, and at the same time supporting women that are coming to them with this concerns and sometimes very serious issues, right? I'm curious about what it was like in the editing room, like as you mentioned, finding those nuggets and the folks that we kind of, as I mentioned, got to know a little bit in the film. I'm sure you had a lot of footage, but then at some point you have to make kind of a nice narrative out of it. That's sad.
Yeah, it was a lot of sort of paying attention to sort of details, and it took a long time, that's why, to edit. I think my overall editing period was like a year and a half.
Wow.
And this is not counting, time to prep, trying to look at things.
Right.
So it was a lot of sort of watching for those moments, because, people are human, and actually understanding the humanity of the cops was really rewarding, though it was challenging.
Yes.
It was extremely, extremely time consuming, because, they have to present themselves professionally. So finding those moments, when they're upset about their teacups being lost, or
Yes.
or the sole male cop is really worried about that the registers don't look good.
Yes.
And he's very worried about the stationery. All of those little moments tell you so much about how the institution of the police functions in India.
Right.
And how how they're sort of under duress. There's no adequate funding. There's no computer in sight.
Right.
Everything's done by hand. All of these things. How is it impacting your day-to-day functioning? Those minutiae actually tells you how the state is actually functioning in India.
That's true.
And that was fascinating for us to observe.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it's like, I always said from the beginning that the police station was kind of the main character in a way of the film. And just, there's a certain fascination that we'll have with people's work.
Yes.
I think it just shows, The Office, and sometimes, I felt a little like I was filming The Office sometimes. Sometimes the cut, especially of the Nat Dale-G, who's the older gentleman who works there. Our sound guy accused me of secretly making a film about him at the same time, because I just was fascinated with his mannerisms and we called it arts and crafts.
Yes.
His stamps and all those tools of the bureaucracy that he used, and so that just adds so much richness to the film, and it just shows the environment, and and then through those moments we were able to introduce humor, because we had just spent all of our time with couples fighting. Yes, that's interesting too. Everyone is kind of interested in those relationship problems. Why are there soap operas, But I think it was a way to interject humor into the film too, by spending time outside of couples fighting.
For sure.
And it was really important for us to say, this isn't all just it's, of course there's some really dark subject matter in the film, but it's also got humor in it. And I think it's really important for people who are thinking about seeing the film that it's not all a complete downer.
And it's life, right? Life has this drama, but it ebbs and flows with humor in it, and that's, I think, kind of how we find solace in some of that murky stuff that you talked about. Anything that surprised you in terms of the women that you captured, or I know you kind of gave us a little bit of updates at the end, but I guess I'm thinking again from this Western perspective of what we think maybe the culture in India might be around marriage, but also how the negotiations happen in terms of like, let's try to keep it together. And some of the women are very serious about just kind of wanting to be on their own.
So what was extremely surprising, I think, for both of us, was the fact that how ordinary women and sometimes men would use something sort of considered scary. Nobody likes to go to the police.
Yes.
But they were using the police system to get what they wanted. And sort of the agency that they were exercising in a society where there's not a lot of social net or any kinds of facilities for people to use. They were doing things like using the police to make sure that the baby had milk.
Right.
Or they could get a separate kitchen from their mother-in-law. So the fact of watching women actually, what we came up with this like phrase that captured it for us.
Yeah, the weapons of the weak.
Oh,
yeah, so if you have few tools at your disposal, you're going to use what's available, and in this case, it was the police.
Right.
And so you see women, and there was thousands of cases every year. Now you can see in the film, and I got so much footage of all those files. I was joking that they should have their separate credit, the file folder.
Absolutely.
and women would. This was in Dehradun, which is the capital. It's the state police headquarters. So,
it's a district
police headquarters. So, women would be traveling for hours to get there, to get to the helpline. And then sometimes, if their husband didn't show up, it was like they're not, and they would have to reschedule. And so, they really were determined to use this tool that was available to them to try to get some relief from whatever their situation happened to be.
Yeah, so I think that surprised us, that this was actually in this like really sort of a way in which you don't expect. It was like actually effective. It actually did help the people who came in. And they were very clear as to why they were there. Right. They weren't looking for long-term solutions because they knew that the police can't provide a long-term solution. Right. But in the immediate term, they were getting what they needed.
So sort of what are you going to do about it now?
Yeah.
That is very interesting.
I think it's risky to watch this film with the idea that the police are going to solve the problem of women in India, you know what I mean, or women's place in India. Like, how could they possibly,
Exactly.
So, if they can't solve it completely, does that mean that this thing is useless and shouldn't exist? And I would argue that no, it is useful. And the women who go there are making it useful in whatever way that they can. Are they going to make, 100% equality in India? No, we don't have it. Where do we have that?
Yes.
Nowhere in the world,
Yeah, and I think that captures it really well for me too, because I wasn't actually sure where it was going to go, and I actually think it's the better way to go into any of these films, especially if we're not of the culture, kind of just go and take it for what it is, because again, we all work with whatever's available to us where we live. And I really appreciated the array of folks that you introduced us to. There were also, some of the family dynamics I think are universal in terms of, families trying to intervene in the relationship of their kids and, how they should run their relationship. So I think a lot of it is very cultural, but at the same time can translate to a lot of what some of us might experience. At least that's how I see some of what I saw, Were people in the film able to see the film yet, or what was the feedback towards wrap up? And
so we've been able to screen it for the police, and they were very supportive because they felt they'd been represented very fairly.
Right.
And this was exactly the work they were doing, and so they felt that was sort of very balanced. Now, 2 of the couples we've lost complete.
Right.
We just haven't been able to find them. And one of the couples is, yet to watch, but they're excited, and and they've settled down pretty happily. So things worked out with other people.
So it worked out.
Yeah. So so they're in a place where this is something that's in the past. It's been dealt with. So yeah.
sometimes you just don't get it right the first time.
Absolutely, and and that's totally okay, right? Well, congratulations on your premiere here. I think you have your first screening today, Sunday, and there's another one after that as well. Two more. You have amazing. You're a hot ticket. You're a hot ticket. I love it. Thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.